Hi there, this is Ms. Redding, and I wanted to walk you through understanding your grade in biology. So as we went over in class, your overall grade is based on a 100% scale. It's a typical 10% per letter grade. A couple of caveats: if you are under 70%, you might be looking at an incomplete or an F depending on where you land. During the term, you might see IP to indicate that your grade is in progress, but note that at the end of the term, an incomplete or an incomplete in progress does become an F. In order to pass the course, you must demonstrate mastery of each essential learning outcome, which we'll look at on the next screen. And you can pass these on a quiz. You can even pass them on the test. You need to also earn at least a 70% in the course to pass the course. We'll take a look at the grade weighting on the right in a moment, and just remember that you can retake ELOs on your quizzes one time, and those are a little lower stakes because you only have one or two at a time, but you can also pass them on the test. That ELO tracking goes in the same category, and when you do retake ELOs and pass them, your score will be updated accordingly. So taking a look at the categories, you see mastery. This is where your ELOs are tracked. It does not count toward your overall grade percentage. However, it is really important to follow this column as this indicates if you're passing or not, with a 1 being a pass and 0 meaning you haven't yet demonstrated mastery for that essential learning outcome. Another category is forms, which is where I track whether or not things like a syllabus has signed and been turned in. You also have a category where your midterm and final exam scores will go. It's just 5% of your grade. Then each of the units is broken down and it counts between 10 to 15% of your grade overall, and you'll see we have 7 units here. Underneath, you'll see that these units are broken down by summative or formative. Tests would be summative, so those are weighted more heavily than smaller things like your notebook grades, Edpuzzles, etc. Here's a list of some example ELOs. This is for a unit on cells, and you can see where specific ELOs are broken down. In this case, there are 5 of them, and they're spread out over 3 different quizzes. Of course, we'll practice these a lot in class with warm-ups and worksheets and notes and labs, so you'll be very familiar with them before you take your first quiz. Here's an example grade for a student. It may or may not reflect where you are in class right now, but it does have a nice breakdown of all the different categories that we saw. Upon first glance, this student looks like they're doing well with a B and 82%, so let's walk through each of these assignments. Just remember that each unit makes up about 10 to 15% of the grade, with those being further broken down to 70 or 30% depending on if it's a test or a larger lab versus notebook grades or Edpuzzles. Also, you need to pass the course with at least a 70% and pass every ELO. So what you see here highlighted in green are formative assignments within the unit, collectively composing 30% of this person's grade for this unit. So this is a notebook and a couple of Edpuzzles. Then you move along to the summative category, and here you'll see at the top that the test is broken down into 2 parts, the ELO portion and the non-ELO portion. The ELO portion is always weighted more heavily because that's where we spend most of our time and effort. And even though the ELOs are tracked separately, they do earn points on the test. You also see a couple of labs, which are usually larger labs that are considered to be summative assignments, and so also weighted at 70% of the unit grade. Now here is that mastery category that I was trying to emphasize. Here in this unit there are 5 ELOs, and they're broken down by specific topic, and you'll see that under the category heading it says mastery. Remember, 1 is a pass and 0 is not yet passed. So here we see the students' scores. These 4 are all 1s, meaning they have demonstrated mastery. However, this one here says that they have not yet passed this particular ELO, so technically they're not yet passing. So it's very important that you pay attention to both their overall grade and the mastery category, the ELOs. Have you passed those or not? So I hope that that helps, and that if you have any further questions, please make sure you reach out. I look forward to working with you on your ELOs to make sure you understand the concepts and to retake your quizzes and your tests And there is a process to retake tests so that you can pass those ELOs. And of course, we'll talk about that in detail in class. I hope that helps, and we'll see you later.